Ukrainian airstrikes continue to pound Russian occupiers across the country, and a precise strike leveled a building in Kherson. A precision airstrike hit the former police building in occupied Oleshki Kherson region. The site was being used as a Russian command post. And also in occupied Oleshki, Russian occupiers have not only set up positions directly inside a residential building, but are calmly showing it off on social media. Then, in the event of a strike, there will be an outcry from Russian propaganda about Ukrainian Nazis allegedly targeting residential buildings. The recent destruction of a Russian column at Volodymyrivka has prompted strong reactions from Russian war bloggers. Some claim the attack to have been successful, despite the losses. Others castigate commanders for sacrificing lives and vehicles. Military informant is in the first camp, commenting, "While during the summer months, the vector of combat operations along the entire front had shifted towards small infantry groups of several men, transported to the front lines by light-wheeled vehicles. In this case, for the first time in a long time, we are witnessing the mass use of tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and armored personnel carriers. Clearly, the accumulated reserves were deployed to expand the existing breakthrough zone, simplify its logistics, and reduce the threat of Ukrainian forces, cutting off the breakthrough's gut, as Volodymyrivka and the adjacent Shakov are a vital road leading toward Kucheriv Yar and Nov Shakov. Footage released by the enemy of attempts to repel the assault once again demonstrates the extreme difficulty of conducting such offensives with masses of armor, as well as the high price paid each time due to the dominance of kamikaze drones in the skies. Nevertheless, due to the weak infantry component of the Ukrainian armed forces' defense in this sector, a column of Russian vehicles was able to enter the village and land troops, who have already consolidated their position. Reports on Russian successes are conflicting, with the Russians claiming to have taken territory, while the Ukrainians claim to have eliminated the troops who were landed from the vehicles. Most likely, the worse the weather becomes in the near future, the more difficult it will be for the enemy to detect the concentration of Russian armored vehicles near the front lines, meaning they will have less time to react. The situation in the Dobropilia breakthrough zone is still extremely precarious and will remain so until Shakov is captured, thereby expanding the front and establishing supply lines. Therefore, we can soon expect more similar attacks involving armored vehicles, which, however, are becoming less and less common on the modern battlefield with each passing month. Moreover, it can be noted that it is quite difficult for Ukrainian FPV drone operators to completely destroy tightly trapped vehicles, and the vehicles themselves do not explode from every second hit. This is likely also a positive factor in the BMP-3's refusal to use 100mm shells during assault operations to prevent them exploding catastrophically when hit. Razvedos is also in the glass-half-full camp. They waited for the weather to clear. They assembled a good force and equipment and blew it away. The enemy was hitting everything: tanks, armored vehicles, motorcycles. But suddenly, they couldn't get it out. The massification of forces and resources was decisive, but it could not help but be decisive. No means of destruction can contradict the basic principles of military art. Yes, a lot has been lost, unfortunately. But everything lost is within our zone of control. This means evacuating the wounded, evacuating equipment, and returning it to service. This isn't a gray area where more is lost in a month than during the assault. Taking a more skeptical view, Fighter Bomber points out that a lot of men and materiel were expended against a relatively marginal location. The question remains unanswered as to how many people and how much equipment, resources, and rainy days would be needed for such a massive operation to liberate all the Vladimirivkas in Ukraine. And there are fortresses and strongholds that are, to put it mildly, more serious than Vladimirivka. Alexander Garmayev is scathing about "losses are no big deal," commentators such as Razvedos. It's complete nonsense from someone who, judging by what I've read, doesn't give a damn what's going on here. Give frontline analytics to someone who has never been to war, and they will run wild. Unfortunately, he's not alone. There are tons of channels spouting similar nonsense, but he certainly distinguished himself. Of course, there are plenty of authors like that. Fuck the tactics, warriors. Stay on track. Write reviews about rags and tactics, like killing cardboard. But the arrow goes here, that goes there, and how everything's fine. They fucked us up so much that it became good. That's not your thing. That's roughly the message behind the high-flown post about taking yet another village full of old women. Everything's fucking fine, and I'm writing this about the Pokrovsk front. Air defense active against Russians. Shaheds and Gerbera's Ukrainian air defenders in action overnight on October 13th in Odessa region, operating under Air Command South. The EU and NATO are closely studying Ukraine's air defense tactics, learning how its integrated systems and rapid response units successfully counter swarms of Russian drones. These lessons are now shaping new strategies and technologies across Europe. For a certain period, time was on Russia's side, but now it's on Ukraine's. Dash says the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Kaja Kallas, who arrived in Kyiv, stated during a joint briefing with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha that Russia's war economy is already weak and will become weaker. Trump said he sent Witkoff to meet with Putin, thinking it would take 15 to 20 minutes, and it turned out he knew nothing about Russia or Putin.
We'll get that one, but I set up a meeting for him to meet with President Putin, thinking it would be a 15 or a 20-minute meeting. Steve had no idea about Russia, had no idea about Putin too much, didn't know too much about politics, wasn't that interested. He was really good at real estate, but he had that quality that I was looking for, and I didn't see it around in too many ways. And I set up the meeting with Putin, and I called. I said, is Steve finished yet? That was about a half an hour into the meeting. No, sir, he's not. He's still inside. This is in Moscow. I said, well, how's he doing? I don't know, sir. He's still inside. I called up an hour later. Let me speak to Steve. Sir, he's still with Putin. He's with President Putin. I said, wow, that's a long meeting, 1 hour. I called up an hour later, he was still with Putin. 3 hours later, he was still with Putin. 4 hours later, he started to get the word that he was going to be coming out soon. And in 5 hours, he came out. I said, what the hell were you talking about for 5 hours? And he says, just a lot of interesting things. We're talking about a lot of interesting things, including what he went in there for, but you can't talk about it for 5. You can talk about it for a certain period of time and you know what you're getting. But that's a talent. That's a talent.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.
Rescues every day. We had a guy last week, it's 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.